All right. So I don't have like a very strong agenda for today, just those four topics I listed. Uh, and I put the link for the blockchain ops page. So why don't we take a few minutes to review the retrospective we did last week? I think Nathan, you weren't around last week, so it might be especially useful for you. So just a quick retrospective on what we talked about in the last cycle, and then we can dive in and talk about what we want to do with the next cycle. So let's take 5 minutes to review. All right. When we get started and take the topics in order, and I thought a good sequence would be to start with the content we want to talk about or somehow address in the next cycle first, and then talk specifically about what Yak Collective should do through what looks like it's going to be a fairly long crypto slump, and then sort of talk about the format because I think once we have an idea of what we want to do, the right format, whether it's these continuing calls or prompt school or some other format would be uh, clearer. And last agenda item would be, is there something slightly more ambitious in terms of a collaborative project we want to do? So it could be like a paper or maybe, I don't know, speculative design of our ideal DAO software or completely open. So let's see. Uh, why don't we start from the bottom this time, starting with Nathan and going up. So let's start with the content. What do you actually want to do in the next cycle?
Wait a minute. Oh, that's weird. I'm listed not at the bottom for myself. I I don't have a lot of opinion. I've pulled in a lot of different directions right now, and so I'm just haven't invested as much thinking in this as I think I would need to really have a strong opinion. So I think I would uh, defer in general to other folks. I mean, personally, where I'm perhaps the most interested in, I'm continuing to make small pushes to get the website more on sort of Web3, and I find myself more interested in the infrastructure components. Um, Things like IPFS, which is not blockchain, but it's sort of related, um, ENS, things like that. So, you know, I'm more interested in learning some of continuing to dig into that and maybe doing projects around that. But I also think that that's maybe a little too narrow for everyone else. I think I would be interested in. I am curious how we could integrate wallets more. I think the wallet paradigm is maybe finally bringing key-based authentication to the masses, if you will. But it's just not really clear to me what the use case is internally for that yet. So those are my thoughts, none of which I think are particularly helpful for this topic. And I'm not sure who I'm passing it to because my list seems to be different than Kat's.
Mayor? Yeah, we're going up from the bottom, Nathan.
Yeah, but I'm below Jenna.
Nathan, it's fine. I'll take it over. So about topics, I think that this is a unique opportunity for us to change the direction of the blockchain a bit, and instead of learning about blockchain, learning about what a technological slump looks like, because we have one happening right in front of us, and this would be useful experience and learning also for future slumps like drone slumps and robotic slumps and AI imaging slumps or whatever will come in the next 20 years. So that's the kind of topic I think might be interesting to cover. Now, regarding what to do, so Jenna wrote finger spitten flugen, whatever it means, feeling at the tip of your fingers. But that really means, when I look at it, to do what you called raids. Okay, we should take something and very small, and everybody should do it. Take something else very small, and everybody should do it. I think that this is very useful for getting our feet wet, and maybe there'll be bigger things and not just get a wallet. Now, there was one other question, which was what should we do during the summer slump? So I don't have a concrete suggestion, but I think, there's two options. One is to do something with higher energy and more fun to keep people engaged. And the other one is to do something lower energy. So I would go for something lower energy so that people in the group don't feel put upon by having, you know, yet another activity that has to fit into their summer. And lastly, I don't have an idea for any particular collaborative project, but I think if we do have one, we should focus on the DAO government side. How do we put, what do you call it, the human side of management back into the algorithmic side of incentive control, and less on the technological side, or even less on how do we use an existing technology to do something. Um, and on to Jenna.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm glad to have hear you clarify why you kept putting raids under my Fingerspitzengefühl, since to me they're they're completely different. My understanding of that word is not the same as yours, so that's fine. Which is of course fine. So I've been typing while I've been thinking here because I have a really strong memory of sitting in my car. I was working remotely up in Maine last summer in August for one of these early calls, and really feeling like appreciating this group coming together so that I just could have an actual sense that wasn't this knee jerk hostility, nor the crypto bro, good morning kind of fake juice. But I've appreciated having this group all year to almost a year now, to have a Fingerspitzengefühl, at least some kind of a real sense of what's happening here. So that's would be my interest in continuing. And then the ideas that I throw out is, would I didn't pursue it. I didn't have anyone who sounded like they wanted to do it with me. But I do think it's an interesting possibility for us, to the extent that the folks on this call know who the honest brokers are in this space, and that we could ourselves host a series. It wouldn't have to be every week. It could be on any cadence we wanted, where we invited people to come and talk in a public private safe space. And that I bifurcated into, we didn't follow it up, but the clarity talk in particular, I really found myself interested in what I've come to call the overstory and the understory. So, and that's from the way trees are, the part underground. So Mayor, you and Richie from Clarity really went in kind of fast and deep on how all this stuff hooks up kind of under the hood. And what we didn't end up having much time for, but I continue to be interested in, is the overstory part, where people like, I'm blanking on her name, who was also there that day. Shoot, I'm just blanking. How you actually have the humans use it. And I sort of feel like I'm useful from that perspective in our group, because I'm not an understory person. I want to not be as scared of it, but I'm not the one who's going to build any of this stuff for us. But if you can build it so that somebody like me can use it, then you're like, okay, I'm at least a little bit useful. So that's that speaker series. And then I should change the order, I suppose. Do we keep a weekly model going on, or do we have a pop-up model? And it could be both. And if we had a pop-up model, what would the equivalent, the next iteration of the Web3 February project that a couple of us did? And again, I didn't change anybody's lives, but it made me feel like I have just some actual sense of what the thing is. Like actually rolling out a Solidity contract for a dweeb like me. That was, what's the next version of that, where getting our hands dirty is useful. So I think that's good for me for now, and passing to Grigori.
Say that, in my view, the biggest problem of this particular chart is that it is always divergent, and there is no well-defined convergence stage for it. So my proposal for the next few weeks, I don't know how many, but not very many weeks, is to actually try and produce some kind of a blockchain governance primer, and try to start and finish it in a shortest period possible for our little group. In case of online governance primer, it took more than a year from start to finish. How about making something useful, something people can read, we can publish in a few weeks. So, and there are actually I have seen a lot of canons, but I have not seen properly written primers. And the difference between a canon like A16Z canon on crypto or Web3 is that in a canon there is just a list of materials and there are a lot of petitions and it's not comprehensive. And basically, for a consumer of a canon, it takes too long to. Primer is different because it is supposed to be short, it is supposed to be comprehensive, it is supposed to cover the appropriate field to answer a specific question, and we can try to produce something like that. I think we are capable of, and we can learn a lot by producing a primer from day one, formulating a question, what is it all about, primer on what, to say week, I don't know, under 10, let's say week 9 from the start, then the primer is actually published. It will help enormously, in my opinion, and I will pass it on to Kabit.
Hey, hello everyone. Yeah, I mean, I think what Grigori was just talking about, the idea of producing something, sounds really nice. Um, I I'm kind of jumping out of order in terms of topics, wanting to be covered. I actually don't know, um, but I think it could be interesting since there's a little less um, velocity at the moment, to kind of pick one topic, perhaps, and then focus on that for a season or a period of time, maybe a sub-season. And so maybe that could be like 3 topics over the course of a season rather than just a changing one every week. And then I think like what we could do, I kind of agree with what Gregoria was saying, was it would be nice to write something. And I wonder if there's a way of kind of, um, I think last week I was talking about the idea of like folding the blockchain track into a prompt school. So maybe it's like some mixture of like the blockchain track and the astonishing stories track, where there's like, writing prompts about the understory and the overstory, and maybe these are like 2 parallel paths. um Maybe like the understory is kind of like the Yak primer, and the overstory is kind of like the tailing the trends or something. And you could sort of have them running in parallel with each other, and then the prompts are sort of geared at getting us to write and reflect on those strands. And then maybe what we do to sort of respect people's um, the fact that they maybe want to go outside during the summer, maybe, I don't know, could be to, instead of syncing for a voice weekly, we sync every 2 weeks. And the discussion is more around like, how do we think the writing is evolving, and more kind of like, yeah, a little more focused, a little less focused on like us implementing it specifically for Yak. And then, because we can always implement at a later point, but maybe like writing about it and kind of really getting a sense for yeah, touching some grass, where we are with the thinking. Well, doing that process might give us a better sense for what we would like to implement if we do decide that we want to do it that way. Yeah, I think that covers my thinking around that. I'm sorry that I don't have like a particular topic. I mean, there are things that I'm interested in, but I don't know if they're really like in alignment with like something that like the Yak Collective would want to discuss. So I think we should probably have I think that should be like an open floor discussion of like what do we actually want to focus on, or what are the 3 things during one of these seasons that we want to look at and write about. All right, I'll pass on to Brian.
Yeah. So I've kind of lost the plot of this track because in the last 2 or 3 months I've only been able to make 2 or 3 meetings. So I'm not like, I think sort of selfishly it would be cool to see a paper or some product of all of these calls and in a way to help catch me up. I think that, like Jenna, I'm probably more interested in the overstory than the understory. And I think one of the comments in here that was interesting was like the difference between Yak Collective and other like DAOs or blockchain based orgs, and in terms of like we're not trustless and we have different tempos, and I think we recognize those things and opted to not just adopt the DAO way. It might be interesting to see what other orgs are doing that are sort of interested but not adopting because they don't feel that pattern works for them, and maybe exploring what kind of patterns do work for us and maybe try to tinker and implement some blockchainy things that are more for us or people, groups like us. Other than that, I like anticipate, probably being in and out of this. I part of me would think that a prompt school I might be able to participate in more, but I've also like softly committed to 2 other prompt schools that I've not been able to keep up with. And as soon as I get behind on those, I just feel like it's impossible to catch up. So I'm not sure that that would work for me. But again, I think I've become kind of a bystander or observer to this call. So I will keep it at that and pass it on to Ben.
Hi. So, I originally got into this chat because, well, I always found it interesting what people were talking about. So, I'm actually, I'd be happy continuing this sort of thing into the next few months if people want. I don't have a lot of time or energy to actually like do other work for this, so I am not like doing other work like paper or something is probably bit outside my wheelhouse right now. If people do want to do something different, because it does seem like we're entered not in only a crypto bear market, but just generally a macro bear market in general. I would be interested in looking at other sort of decentralized tech projects that aren't crypto or blockchain based. If people want to do that, I'm not sure that's within the scope of what this meeting is supposed to be. But I would find that interesting. I guess I'm not quite sure what I would want to do with this aside from the fact I probably don't have the energy to like actually do more work. So I guess I'll move it on to the next person.
Yeah, it's me. Uh, well, I found the guest talks interesting. So if there is a slump, we could just ask other people to come and give us some talks and have discussions with us. So that would be something really interesting. And the idea of a paper also sounds interesting, but just finishing it in the next cycle seems too short. So we already have a paper on the online governance primer, so maybe that is a starting point, and looking at it from the blockchain point of view would be interesting. Yeah, so maybe I'll pass it on to Venkat.
All right, so I'm just going to quickly try and summarize the big ideas that seem to have floated up. So it looks like there is actually significant interest in something like a paper like Grigory raised, uh, having more people show up to do kind of like guest conversations. Uh, in terms of actually doing like hands-on stuff, the two ideas on the table seem to be something like more raids, which means we actually have to find things to go raid, and the other is working more on the infrastructure, website, IPFS kind of stuff, which is limited by how many people have the hands-on skill to do it. And I think Jenna's framing of overstory, understory is kind of useful here because there's really two things going on here. And understory, I think there's fewer people able to participate in that, and overstory, there's more people able to participate in that. And I think it's interesting to have like a mix of people of different sort of both technical hands-on skill level as well as an ability to grasp the technical level of the discourse as well. And I think it's the couple of points I wanted to make that haven't been made so far is we do have a big gap in our capability, as in even though we have several technical people, both hands-on and able to follow technical discussions, we don't actually have anybody on board able to like program in Solidity and having the time to like help us like get into that level of hands-on. So we are stuck at the level of like no code or low code experimentation and playing with wallets and sort of things like Colony, where you can like try and like spin up a DAO without actually programming smart contracts and so forth. So that's one limitation or gap to keep in mind. The other thing I wanted to flag is the two sort of larger experiments we did in the last cycle, which was Clarity and Colony, both kind of like petered out and sort of ran out of steam after a couple of like circlings of playing with the technology. And I don't think that's our fault. It's mainly a fault of the technology is both not mature enough and the sort of fit to the use case is not clear enough. Like there are other technologies we've adopted, like Roam, for example, where we've fallen into a consistent pattern, maybe not super disciplined or clean, but we are using it. So clearly, it's not that we are unable to adopt tools, it's that tool itself has some maturation and fit problems to overcome. So I want to sort of keep an eye on that and ask, like, at what point will some piece of the technology be at a point where we can consistently adopt it without needing Solidity developer level people on board? So I think that's kind of a background question we should kind of keep circling and revisiting and asking whenever we can. Like, at what point is this thing actually ready for us to dive in given our capabilities? Let's see. So that's the summary. Those are my couple of points. One random thought I had was, even though we don't have the capability or energy to do like serious technology building, like if a technology exists and we have like some suitable place like our website, we might be able to do a little bit of integration. Like I think something like having MetaMask sign in for our website to update NAC, I don't know, some version of that might be within reach. But clearly, we're not the kind of group that can build a Web3 product like an auction site, right? But it might be interesting to ask, is there something we can do along those lines? So this is actually aligned to something like the blockchain primer idea that Gregory suggested, but more on the speculative design side. So what Commit said actually got me thinking along these lines. Like, if you're trying to do the primer in an astonishing stories model anyway, maybe you go all the way and say, can we actually do speculative design, just like we did speculative fiction? So by that I mean something like, I don't know, mock-ups, wireframes. At that level of design, can we imagine an interesting product and put it out there just to be a discussion starter? And maybe we come up with an idea that's interesting enough that programmers would get interested and kind of want to work with us to actually build it. So something like, say, Prompt School, or like just an ambitiously imagined infrastructure for an online, decentralized, distributed school platform with like prompt tracks, a way to like maintain grades and credentials, a way to sign in with your wallet. We have no capability to build something like this, but I think we have the capability to like week by week build up a wireframe design for this, and we are doing enough with a non-blockchain prototype that we actually are generating interesting user experience data as well. So that's something that kind of interested me. But okay, uh, I don't want to sort of put it to a vote what the format or topics are, because I think it's still kind of like a little vague and nebulous, but let's do another round of comments. So sort of reactions to what you've heard so far, and any more precise thoughts on what we should do. Floor is open.
I think that building a blockchain prompt school is not beyond our capabilities, but it has little to do with our Monday night or Monday morning talks. It's a project. We can do a project, but we probably can't involve most of the people here in the blockchain side of things, and therefore it's not interesting. So that's what I feel.
I mean, I'm curious to hear more why you think we wouldn't be able to involve people outside of the technical side. I mean, designing a speculative product involves a lot of other insights that don't necessarily come from engaging with the technical background of blockchains.
I'd rather hear comments from other people before I answer you.
That was just a casual thought, and in terms of format, yeah, if it makes more sense as a kind of like related sub project, yeah, we can think about that. Um, but I did have a comment on a different matter, which is Grigory's idea that we should be able to do like a compact version of the governance paper in a few weeks. I'm much more skeptical that we could pull that off, mainly because reflecting on the effort it took to get the last governance primer out, it had that characteristic of like the first 90% took 50% of the time, and then the last 90% took the other 50% of the time. So that's Hofstadter's law, the joke that you think there's only 10% left, but there's 90% left. And the last 90%, so to speak, was Sachin, me, and Jenna kind of like really try to like kick the less structured parts of the document into shape. So the introduction, conclusion, the overall flow, the continuity. And my sense is much of the complexity that takes time is the fact that it's kind of integrated, and there's like big picture sort of consistency requirements for a document like that somebody has to put in unstructured time to enforce. And I'm wondering if there's a way to do something that is in fact as short as Grigory would like it to be. But I think that what's required then is to come up with an idea that's much more modular. And an example, I'm not saying we should do this, but it's as an example, something like, say, a glossary is doable in a much more modular way. And say, to think it through, if you did it in a prompt school way, you could say something like each week's prompt would be a themed topic, where the prompt would be, today come up with one term and definition for something related to blockchain on, say, the technology side or the social side or the DAO side. And topic by topic, we hammer out like, a glossary of 50 terms, and that becomes a useful artifact to produce. Now, something like that, I think, is doable in a short time with relatively little meta editing and stuff. And it's not a canon, it's not a primer, but it's not a canon either, in that it's actually a document you can just read straight through and get some value out of immediately. It's not sending you off to 10 other things to read. So yeah, that's something as an open prompt for you guys to think about over the next week. Maybe we should revisit this next Monday, as in like how to actually operationalize this. But the prompt to think about is, can you think of a good modular framework structure where somebody doesn't have to do like 90% of the cleanup towards the end in order to get it to publishable form? Something that takes shape in sort of structured form so that you could actually hit pause any moment and hit publish, and it would actually be in decent shape. So think about structures that can pull that off. And more comments?
I mean, I know that you're proposing the glossary just as like an example of a modular form. But I mean, I will say, like, I would be really interested in that. I think, you know, the like blockchain lexicon project that Meredith and I and Sashin were looking at a little bit earlier didn't really get very far, and it kind of did end up taking that kind of like speculative project design approach. But there just wasn't enough like general interest. But like the glossary thing would really fit in with something like that, and I also just think is like an interesting approach to the prompt school. And yeah, I mean, I'd be really interested in that. I think it would also then be interesting as like building up like the vernacular in these conversations. So like having conversations that are informed by the glossaries that we're making. I don't know. It's just that I guess that's a long-winded +1 for me for that specific idea, not to kind of like, you know, say that that's what we have to do, but I do think that's a really interesting thing to do.
Uh, just one thought on that. Can the prompt school be used to get out a product or some fiction or small fiction? That would be nice. So it bootstraps the prompt school itself.
Anuraj, I didn't quite understand that. What do you mean use prompt school to generate fiction?
Or fiction, or any, like, if you have a prompt school, then so it's you being used to teach someone something, right? For example, the glossary. So what do people understand by glossary? So if you have a, so if you could record what people are replying and then try to get something out of it. That was like a thought of.
Oh, I get it. So I think instead of using the prompt school for teaching or learning a topic, you actually use it to generate some
Yes.
kind of product, like a story or like a
Yes.
design.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's a thought. Like if the design or whatever writing project can be broken down appropriately into the prompt school format, that gives you an automatic way to actually produce it simply through prompts.
I mean, how like far away are we from being able to implement something like GPT-3 into our prompt school so that there's like a mixture between human in the loop prompts and you know, it's such a meme at the moment, but like Dolly images or like GPT-3 responses, so that there's like some sort of weird hybrid thing. And that also kind of gets us into the kind of like automation stuff that we were interested in a little bit earlier when we were looking at DAOs. Um, yeah, it's a thought.
I'll give my answer. What I've seen is all the GPT-3 people don't want you. I mean, the one or two that I've looked at don't want you using it in, let's call it, customer facing uses, because they don't want it to say the Yak Collective used GPT-3 and it uses bad language. Okay, so technically it shouldn't be difficult at all, but I don't know if anybody is willing to do it.
Could we use something like GPT-J, which is like an open source version of GPT-3? I mean, the number of variables and parameters that it's trained on, etc., is much lower, but like for our purposes, I think it would probably be sufficient. And also, like, it's not like we're training GPT-3 on like the Yak Collective's corpus of language. We're just utilizing its corpus.
Um, Send me a link and I'll see what we can do. I think you would want it less for prompts and more at stage one at least, and more for generating hints for the prompt. Things to get people to talk about it. But I don't know if this is what we should be talking about now. But if you send the
It's
link,
fair enough. Yes,
we
it's
can
fair
know.
enough.
I do want to re-raise the idea Jenna brought up of having people drop in as guests, since that was another idea that I think a lot of people resonated with. So, what's the lowest effort way to pull that off, as opposed to high energy hustling and networking and somebody having to play I don't know, seminar series curator and so forth?
I penciled in the last call of the next 3 months on the roam while we've been playing around. And if people already know 3 names that they are, who are the kinds of people that are legit and in the space that would be fun and instructive to talk to, I would take a minute right now just to do a round of nominations, Venkat. How does that sound?
Yeah, if people know people personally they'd be interested in inviting, yeah, nominate right now maybe. I mean, I know quite a few people.
Oh,
The
Yeah, who is the lens protocol person? There's I think somebody from Spain. I think his name is Miguel.
Miguel, I think, is one of the top developers
hmm.
who's using it, but I don't know that he's actually the one driving Lens Protocol itself. So
Okay.
Lens Protocol is the thing they're building on. Oh yeah, I know Miguel, so I could invite him. Um, yeah, I know some of the senior people in the Ethereum world, so if there's interest at really high level of the industry, I might be able to get one of them there. Uh, but I think it's more interesting to find people more like the colony clarity level people, like people actually trying to build stuff on top of the platforms.
It, also, if people like Gnosis, um, to to I think Brian just dropped in something about having repeaters. So what if we revisited? So how is Gnosis dealing with the retrenchment? Or I guess we never really had anybody from Cabin come. I actually have been carrying. They, I watched one of their year-end thing this spring, and turns out John and whoever it was, the couple of people at the top, they're making like $100,000 a year. They're actually paying themselves, which I fine, but I had this moment of what? And then everybody else, is scrabbling around for cabin coin. So I'm interested in some version of how does the money work. I'm really glad that we're all just doing this for the yucks at so far.
Well, yes, I think you said a couple of interesting things there. One is, I think, yeah, like you and Brian say, having people who've already been here come back, so we have a 2 data point view of how they're dealing with the downturn. That would be very interesting. Yes. So yeah, anybody we've had come before, plus or we've talked about and haven't come yet, that would be interesting. So let's do that. And the money stuff, yeah, I think we'll hear interesting stories of how people are managing the full-time commitment people, especially through the ups and downs. Because if they're relying on treasuries of particular values to pay people stable amounts, not only is the volatility killing them, the stable coin stuff is collapsing all around us as well. So yeah, that would be interesting to hear what they're doing. Yeah. All right. So let's keep the track open for at least 3 or 4 visits from people. All right. I'm going to take the task of synthesizing today's discussion into kind of a cleaned up proposal on how to um, manage the next cycle, and I'll have that for discussion next week, and we can kind of sign off on that. But yeah, any other top level thoughts on not just the next 3 month cycle, but yeah, the rest of the year, maybe sort of vague directions and ideas and thoughts?
I ask whether we should continue the blockchain or whether we should go to a different technology. On the one hand, maybe blockchain is now in a downturn, and on the other hand, maybe we picked enough of the low-hanging fruit that if we go to different technology, we can pick some more low-hanging fruit. I'm just raising that as an option because it wasn't raised before.
Well, on that point, I mean, Ben was talking about looking at some other distributed or decentralized technology. I wonder if maybe Ben has any ideas. I mean, I think maybe kind of broadening the scope to just like decentralized governance rather than blockchain governance or decentralized technology could be an interesting way of still interfacing with this area, but broadening the scope a little bit. I wonder if Ben has any ideas for what he was thinking about when they brought that up.
So, someone earlier, I think in one of the mentioned Hollow, which is kind of half a blockchain from what I know. I haven't looked into it in years, but if we wanted to have a talk about that, that could be fun. I also something I do follow is I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Open Privacy. What they're trying to build is like a chat app that's metadata resistant. And they don't have anything to do with the blockchain, but they actually get most of their donations or most of their money from donations from cryptocurrency. And this is pushing my limits. This is something I'd like to know more about, but don't actually know a ton. But stuff like, I mean, pretty much all the crypto space runs on Discord, so it's kind of silly that I mean, I honestly, since I work in the space, I think that chains are important, but there's so much other infrastructure that is sort of like that needs to be built to actually make this, robust and not just moving the bottleneck to like Discord or whatever. But I mean, I also like the idea that Venkat was talking about earlier about the what was it, glossary. That's something that's fun and relatively easy. So I'd be up for that as well if this is not something people want.
Quick clarification question to Meyer. You do have like some scope limits in mind, right? So for example, we do have adjacent prompt school tracks on AI and terraforming, and the rover project is effectively a robotics track. You're not suggesting that this meeting become kind of a roving spotlight on the full scope of potential technology teams. You still want it like somewhere circling the blockchain corner of the map. Is that the correct understanding, or do you think in spotlight terms?
The word want, it's not about want. I'm just thinking, what are we really trying to get out of the blockchain? And it depends on the people who come or who will come. If most of the people are coming because they're interested in blockchain and algorithmic governance and distributed management and things like that, so it should stay in that orbit. But if most of the people are coming because they want to get a feeling for this hot new technology and understand how it fits in the world and how they fit in it, so any hot new technology, I that's my answer. I don't know if it helps you.
Yeah,
For what it's worth,
so yeah, my instinct just watching people talk and discuss this and other topics is I think people who join this call, apart from like logistics and timing, they are actually interested in specifically the blockchain hot new technology, not just the latest any hot new technology. So for example, if tomorrow nanotechnology exploded, it would be a different group that would be interested in that, not this group. So my instinct is it is actually something around this orbit.
I'll also just briefly add to that. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, I think that like this track becomes a little less interesting when we do what I was calling last time like trend tailing. I think when we focus on things that are not like in the kind of like high level main discourse of the overstory, like the discussions are more interesting. So having a kind of roaming hot topic, even in this space, let alone opening it up a little more, is, for me anyways, less interesting.
Just adding on to that, just a comment. The blockchain calls do bring more traffic to the YouTube channel. Just additional thought.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But okay, yes. So I think
I want to fix what Anuraj said. Having this blockchain talk has brought participating people to the Yak Collective as well.
it has. Okay. Do we have examples? Like, did somebody find us through the YouTube and join because of it?
I'm not talking about the YouTube. I'm talking about in general. There's people who
Oh, yeah.
came because of blockchain.
Definitely, there are definitely people.
It doesn't mean that they're going to leave if it's not blockchain, and it doesn't mean that other people will not come if we talk about optimization of delivery drones. But I'm just pointing out, Anwar is saying people watch it. I'm saying, and people are coming. Okay, so.
Yeah. So my takeaway from this, unless somebody wants to contradict, is there's interest in zooming out a little bit, so taking in a somewhat larger scope and maybe being a little sloppy in enforcing the content. So if we want to do one random raid on like people applying robotics in a distributed way because that's insightful for this theme, that's fine, but not a systematic trend tailing thing. So that's my sense, and I'll try and synthesize today's discussion with that in mind. Couple minutes left. Any other thoughts?
I think I would like to just sort of second the notion that Ben initially brought up, and then a couple of people have echoed about zooming out a little bit and just looking more at distributed technologies and governance in general. I think that sort of makes a lot of sense if you think of blockchain as maybe one component to a broader ecosystem like that, and then it also opens up some other interesting technologies and questions about like blockchain. What runs it is very high powered devices, but do you want to say, well, we want something that's more friendly, more truly distributed amongst everybody, something you can run on a Raspberry Pi, which we were kind of talking about in the beginning, was how can we run blockchain on a Raspberry Pi effectively. But there are distributed projects that you could do that. And so, maybe there's, I think that would be an interesting sort of direction to broaden out into if we were going to broaden out, or if we were going to do spotlights, to spotlight in that sort of direction.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I know we're out of time. The off-chain automation that we are already, have been doing kind of for a long time now, so that there's something there that's niggling at me as possibly being really good and interesting for us. We're already doing off-chain automation. What parts of it would go on-chain, and what would that do? Like, there's something really interesting that could emerge in the practical side of the stuff people have been bringing up today. Pass it back, Venkat.
Yeah, so the thought that just got sparked from me with Nathan sort of tagging the zoomed out view as basically broader distributed system. So yeah, I think that's the proposal on the table. Zoom out from just blockchain specific to distributed systems in general. And that got me thinking that something like a glossary, but still not a primer, but almost as easy as a glossary, is a map, like a visual allegorical map of the sort I like to make for my own stuff. But can we make, as a project for this next cycle, a kind of interesting metaphoric map of distributed systems in general, with the continent of blockchain and the continent of distributed identity systems, and refine it over several weeks, and then we come up with a good little sketch map, and then we get an artist to actually execute it. And I've done that a couple of times with Grace, the artist who drew our online governance paper stuff. So a map, I think, is a very interesting and doable distributed artifact to talk about distributed systems. So that'll be kind of like, if you guys watch Seinfeld, Kramer made a coffee table book about coffee tables. Sounds something like that. Damn. All right, so I'll synthesize this into a proposal next week and we'll get started on the summer cycle. See you guys next week and keep posting comments and thoughts on this stuff over the next week in Discord.